Another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony. Good to see Eric.
Bob, welcome again, and here we are jumping into the fray once more.
Yes.
So it's a lot of stuff to cram in, and maybe we won't get to it all, but you know what? We'll do a cold open, almost cold open, and roll the video of that South Carolina fiasco that took place a week ago, plus when this airs next Monday. So roll tape, please.
Hands behind your back. Give me your hands. Give me your hands.
Now, since there's no audio, I'm just going to narrate for a second. This is Spring Valley High School in Columbia, South Carolina. And we see a sheriff's deputy taking down a student who declined to put away her cell phone. But as you can see, his reaction is what's gaining the media attention.
Okay, I think we've seen enough of that. I'll tell you, basically, I actually, the kind of outrage that conduct provoked was, I guess, pretty much the height of what I've seen on social media up to now, practically.
And it's strange to say that because we've seen a lot just in the last few months. But this particular video, the first time I first heard of it on social media. Of course, I didn't see it on the news, and some friends had alerted me to it, saw it, and wow, just blew me back.
Yeah, I had heard about it, and then I believe over the weekend, I think, or the back end of the week, maybe the CBS Evening News led with this as their opening story because it was just so egregious. So the interesting thing about that for us, because we try to keep tabs on media, as we do, show called Media Watch, the reaction was swift from the school department, the school board, the principal. I believe it was a black principal in this Spring Valley High School. Was a white superintendent of school, but they were both having.
They were on the same page on this one.
Yes, and they said we cannot tolerate this type of behavior, et cetera, et cetera. And so this particular officer, they did a quick investigation, and basically he was fired summarily as soon as the sheriff finished his quick. He's a sheriff deputy, so
right.
That sheriff terminated him almost instantaneously, having seen the video, and I presume having heard from the school district.
He basically said that this is not the way we train our deputies. He did not follow our standards for how you respond to a case like this.
Yeah, which actually there was some talk from the same sheriff's office that there was another video, and that particular video purportedly showed the young lady swinging at the officer, but the statement at the time was that they had the video, but they were not going to show it at the time.
Okay.
And so my problem with that was, well, if you have the video and it exonerates the
Absolutely.
sheriff, why not show it? So
yes.
because we've seen the other video,
right.
why are you holding off on that one?
You could actually use a video at this point in your corner.
That's right. So I was a little skeptical about that particular, and I'm guessing I've seen 3, 4, 8 different angles of 2 separate videos, and I did see that young lady swing at that sheriff's deputy, but that was after he put his arm around her neck and proceeded to yank her, and then I saw her arm go flailing at him. That was the first time I saw her move from the time he approached her. Whether that other video will show something else, but I presume since we haven't seen it,
right.
It probably doesn't.
Probably does not.
So.
But the videos we've seen are pretty clear,
right.
and they show just about all of the action. So unless there's something blocked, which
yeah.
doesn't seem there is.
Now, the interesting thing about that, and because we like to put things in perspective, we saw an interview with the lawyer who represented the young woman, the student, and he basically admitted to the fact that she had been disrespectful to her teacher. Her teacher had asked her to put away her cell phone because she was talking on the cell phone. And she did not do that.
Right.
And so when the teacher asked her to leave the room, she said she didn't want to leave the room because she didn't want to be kicked out of the class.
Right.
So she put the cell phone away. No, she may not put the cell phone away at the time. The teacher then called for the principal and the school police security officer that then appeared on the scene.
Right.
Now, you can't be disrespectful to your teacher. I mean, I don't care who you are, what student you are, your teacher is the sole authority in your classroom. You have to show respect. One, she's your teacher. Two, she's an adult, and you need to be respectful. However, having said that, the fact that the police officer, the sheriff deputy came up with what I call a very aggressive interaction with the young lady.
Right.
He exchanged 2 words, and basically whatever he said, she didn't comply with, and he proceeded to put his arm around her neck. And that, for me, is just unacceptable.
Now, I see it from sort of the 2 positions. Of course, we've both been students at some point, and I've also taught. I also taught at Long Island University, and I'll accept some give and take from a student who doesn't agree with an opinion or has a different way of doing things in the classroom. But at the end of the day, you are the authority in the room, and the respect needs to be mutual. We want that mutual respect in the room. She did not give it back. She was belligerent. So, that's a minus for her. The response, obviously, from the officer was nowhere near what was required. In my case, I guess I would have notified my department, might have notified security. I'm pretty sure Long Island University security would not have reacted like that. They're smarter than that.
For me, she gets no pass for being disrespectful to her teacher. The officer gets absolutely no pass for assaulting her.
Absolutely
Basically,
none.
that was an assault.
I agree.
And so this goes back to the fact that discipline in schools nowadays are no longer, we've done shows on this in the past on Media Watch. We've done this schools to prison pipeline.
Right.
And we've talked about the fact that
Unfortunately.
discipline in the public school system across the country, definitely here in New York, has been abrogated from the school personnel. Principals don't run their schools. Some security police officer is the disciplinarian in the public schools these days. This incident goes back to what I keep harping on. They need to get police out of schools and get disciplinary activity back into the hands of experienced school personnel.
Now, I believe the sheriff actually said that himself. I think the sheriff said that it would have been better if the school took care of the situation by itself and did not engage his officers. Now that you say that, that's basically what he was asserting, that we need to handle more of this within the school and not have it bleed out into law enforcement, which is the way it was done when, I hate to sound like an old man, but that's the way it was done when I went to Brooklyn Tech and other local city schools.
Grammar school, high school, we had school principals, we had guidance counselors, and any disciplinary problems was handled by a teacher, principal, and or maybe with the help of a guidance
Right.
counselor.
A little bit of teamwork involved.
Yes, and there weren't any cops walking around our hallways in grammar school or high school, and definitely not in college. So for these young people to be coming up in the environment of having to, one, go through metal detectors just to get into their classrooms. I know they do that here in New York City in certain schools, primarily in black and brown neighborhoods. And then to have the disciplinary load taken off of the school officials and put onto law enforcement, I can see why there is a school to prison pipeline. As Alan Singer had articulated for us on another one of his appearances, and so we're going to let that be the segue to deal with ending this particular segment on what was one of the most horrendous things I've ever seen pertaining to police assaulting young black individuals, assaulting any individual. So Bob, we said Alan Singer, Dr. Singer was with us on our last show,
Right.
and we were talking a number of educational issues. So here we are still talking education. But I noticed he had put up a blog, a recent blog in Huffington Post, which was a follow-up to the discussion we had about Eva Moscowitz success academies here in New York, which basically now they're calling suspension academies
Yes.
because of the profiles that was done on her by not just one, but two mainstream media outlets here in the metropolitan area. 60 Minutes did an in-depth sit-down with her and pretty much highlighted how she was using suspension tactics to just streamline her student body. And then the PBS broadcast also did a similar piece with her.
Right.
And I don't know if you saw either one.
I saw the reports on them, and I caught a piece of one. And like you said, they echoed what he was saying here on our show, that the suspension rates, the suspension technique is used to basically cleanse the class of troublesome students. And so instead of handling them, they just put back into the city's schools, and they don't have to deal with them at all.
Yes. Interestingly enough, skimming Dr. Singer's blog, he's actually referring to the interaction between Moscowitz and the PBS News Hour, because evidently the PBS News Hour was just as pointed in their grilling of her on these suspension rates and talking the statistical numbers about how skewed they were. And so she fired off a letter to PBS about not really giving her equal time and didn't give her a chance to rebut what was put out there. And I actually saw the broadcast following that particular, I didn't see that interview,
Okay.
but I believe it was Judy Woodruff who was tasked with doing the PBS on-air response to the letter.
That's probably the piece that I caught. But go ahead.
Okay. Basically, Judy Woodruff said, look, we got the letter and we acknowledged receiving the letter, and basically because we were charged with not giving Ms. Moskowitz time to, I'm paraphrasing here, a chance to respond in the piece, we've now put her response on our website and you can check into it, et cetera, but she closed her addendum to that particular broadcast by saying PBS stands by its previous report.
Right.
So it's interesting that this suspension academy, success academy story is starting to gain some legs, is getting some traction,
Right.
and maybe there may be some people who are elected who might want to take a look at why this particular charter entity is getting so much dollars and how some of those resources are being siphoned off from the regular public schools, students and teachers. I think this is a story that needs revisiting. I think this is an issue that needs serious light being cast upon it.
And it's good to have somebody like Judy Woodruff responding, because there was no backing off of the story. I mean, they did a good story, they did the research, and now they're sticking with it. I've seen too many cases where media outlets back off from what they've reported, and they soften their tone, and they almost engage in apologetic journalism. And obviously, that's not the case here. So I'm kind of it's good to see that it doesn't always happen.
I am so glad you said that, because I saw Dan Rather on Rachel Maddow's show a couple of nights ago. When this airs, it's probably half a week ago.
Right.
And basically, she had brought Dan Rather on because this movie that Robert Redford and the Australian blonde actress, what's her name? Cate Blanchette, starring in. It's called Truth. Did great stuff, I think, at Toronto Film Festival and maybe at Sundance. But it's out in release now. And basically, it's revisiting the George W. Bush election campaign of 2000, that first run.
Okay.
And basically, there was a story that had actually been broken by the Boston Globe and a number of other outlets that actually targeted the fact that the then candidate George W. Bush had gotten a cushy position in the Air National Guard, so he wouldn't have to go to Vietnam. And so he got his pilot wings, and as one guy who had to review his record said, government spent millions of dollars training him to be a pilot, so they would expect him to fulfill his commitment.
Right.
Turns out that after a little bit of time, he became a no-show at his Air National Guard unit. So the story broke, and actually the records that the military establishment had at the time indicated that, yeah, he was a no-show.
Okay.
Subsequently to all that, those records disappeared.
Right. Okay.
So when the Boston Globe hit with their story, it didn't get too big away, but nobody in television had touched it. But rather than 60 Minutes, decided they'd do it.
Okay.
And in the course of doing it, there was a series of memos that they got. To make a long story short, the memos were challenged. All right? Now, understand, the underlying no-show, did not fulfill commitment story, not inaccurate.
Okay.
The man didn't show up for his National Guard commitment. That's a true factual. Okay. But what they challenged were these particular memos.
Okay.
And so the movie that's out now called Truth, that's the name of the movie,
all right,
rehashes that entire fiasco. And I call it a fiasco because what you said about news organizations standing by their reporters and standing by their stories, CBS basically caved.
Okay.
The CBS network, and I'll say it with no fear of contradiction because I was incensed at the time, because I know we covered that story on Media Watch. We knew, I mean, ex-military, I dig into stories about people who don't live up to their commitments.
Sure.
We knew this guy was a no-show. We knew that he'd gotten this cushy job. The story was accurate. The fact that the reporting of the story with these memos, the memos got challenged, and it turns out that nobody could come up with a definitive, yes, they're accurate, but nobody could say, yes, they're fake. But because there was this question mark, lo and behold, they were challenged, and CBS basically asked rather to apologize on air about this story and its lack of veracity. Well, he really wasn't apologizing for the veracity of the story. He was apologizing for the veracity of the memos. And
from a network guy like you, that's both strange, but you could see it based on what you know about management.
Yeah. In the old days, under Richard Salant or Bill Leonard, those are former CBS presidents, and when there was a big firewall between corporate and the news business, those guys would have never buckled. They would have never apologized for that.
Fred Friendly
story.
Wouldn't have put up with that.
No. It's just ridiculous that they cave like that. So, but basically it was the end of Dan Rather's career at CBS because I don't think he was happy about having to do that, and pretty soon they parted ways. I don't know if he won the lawsuit. I think he had a lawsuit with them about wrongful.
There were other elements to his departure, but I guess that was a piece of one that stayed under the radar. There were other elements of why he was...
that was the trigger that basically broke the dam or whatever.
And once again, I hate to talk management, but he had been in that seat for a while.
I think 24 years.
Yeah, even longer than Walter Cronkite. So they were looking for an out.
That could have been part of it. They were looking for new, young talent, fresh, supposed... more eyeballs. Maybe he was starting to age a little bit.
Yes. And in TV, you're not allowed to do that.
But yeah, it's interesting because media is as much what you can bring to the table, not just your credentials, especially television media folk. We're talking visual media. It's what that persona, what that appearance, what that personality comes through this screen, this tube from us to you. And that's a full package, and it's very interesting that today, more than ever, I think they go more by the telegenic, what the appearance looks like, as opposed to what's inside up here and in here.
But it does count because of course, we had the recent basic takedown of Brian Williams. I mean, once he became less than fully believable, the network didn't want to deal with him, and they would have found an out somewhere. Luckily, the network does have Lester Holt, and he's been just excellent in that spot. I don't give anybody a free pass. I'm sure he can use work just like any other anchor, but so far so good there.
I'm going to tell you my take on that. I'm not cynical. I'm not skeptic. I watched that dance that network did. When it hit the fan and they knew this guy had been stretching the truth more than once, they did a dance, a long-term dance on how they were going to take him out of that chair, because they didn't really want to take him out of that chair.
No.
They tap dance around it. They went, we're looking into it. We're investigating it. I think maybe we'll give him a temporary suspension.
Right.
Trust me. They see how fast that sheriff fired that sheriff deputy? Brian Williams didn't get demoted in that kind of speed, which basically he should have, because people out there that get their news from television, they have to believe the people who are bringing that news to them.
Right.
If you are not trustworthy and you come across as being untrustworthy, you have destroyed their confidence, not only in you, but in your organization and in the news media in particular. The general news media. So it makes it bad for all of us in the business when you turn out to be a charlatan.
And with the NBC, they spent a lot of time with their public relations, internal and external. There are public relations firms that specialize in damage control. I'm sure they hired somebody there. A good friend of ours, I won't throw his name out since he's not involved in this, is involved in damage control at a PR firm. And they took, you're right, they took their time. And then quietly, one day, the name with Brian Williams came off, even though they hadn't named Lester Holt yet. And then slowly but surely, Lester had filled him so much that they actually believed in him. And now it's his program for now.
Yes. And the interesting thing is, they should have stepped up to the plate instantly, as opposed to stretching it out and dragging it out, because it wasn't good for Lester Holt and it wasn't good for Brian Williams.
Right.
It just dragged that stuff out and made a bad situation worse.
Right. That's old network, not today's network, unfortunately. Stretching things out seems to...
Actually, I think that's new network. The old guys, they would have not necessarily fired him, but they would have chopped that quickly, as opposed to stretching it out like these, because these folks didn't want to lose that rating that they had with him. That's why they stretched it out so long. I mean, that's my take.
I mean, I'll just give a quick story. When I was still working as a reporter in Milwaukee, there was a TV reporter, and here again, I'll skip her name. She's taken enough torture for it, who basically got drunk one night and shot across a bridge over the Milwaukee River at 60 miles an hour. And there are no bridges over the Milwaukee River within the city that you can take at that speed. And she got belligerent with the cops. She was arrested. And so there was no social media, but it was widely reported. They actually took their time. It was weeks and maybe months before they actually terminated her. They were looking for ways to maintain
not have
her,
to terminate her, right?
But they got enough letters and calls, and like I said, this is pre-internet, that they couldn't. They found their hands tied. So doesn't always happen fast, not even in the old days. But
interesting. We got about 4 minutes left, but talking about social media and talking about how people react to certain things, just circle back to the South Carolina cop incident, because there have been two media reaction to the coverage or to the incident. In my inbox came a petition from Color of Change, and basically what they were talking about was they were incensed because there was a CNN commentator. He's one of these quote law enforcement experts that CNN uses all the time. Last name is Houck, H-O-U-C-K. And evidently, his reaction to the sheriff's deputy's interaction with the young lady in the classroom was to the effect that he did his job, she basically deserved it, and so he basically, according to the petition, He again was rushing to the defense of the officer in question. And what for them, color change people with this petition, this was like the last straw. They evidently been monitoring this particular CNN person because during the Sandra Bland incident with that police department, he basically came out with a similar attitude, same kind of comments, and it wasn't just Bland, he listed a whole number of others, and I'm saying to myself, well, why would CNN want to have somebody, evident this guy Houck was a former NYPD detective.
Harry Houck, just to give
Harry Houck?
Yeah,
okay.
Just to give the full name.
And the bottom line is, he's just basically a defender for all law enforcement, all police officers on the beat, according to the color change people. I'm giving it to you secondhand based on the petition I read, folk. But if you can't find a better, more objective law enforcement criminal justice commentator, it doesn't have to be a beat cop. It can be a lawyer. It can be a judge. It can be anybody with the background and expertise, not somebody who's going to be rote just standing up for cops, good, bad, or indifferent every time out. And evidently that's Houck's track record according to Color of Change.
But
so that was one social media. Go.
No, but you have people like Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, a former cop. And he'll come out on both sides of police issues based on what? Thought. He actually analyzes the situation and determines, based on his own experience as a cop and his experience as a citizen of the city of New York, what should have been done in this case. But this commentator, Harry Houck, has done this in the past. He's made statements that just gave the police a free pass if somebody doesn't comply with the
whatever the cop wanted them to do.
Absolutely.
Okay, doesn't matter what they do afterwards.
Right.
They're okay. They're in the right.
Right.
Hey, I can't go with that. But I think we got about 3 minutes left.
About a minute.
About a minute.
Yes.
Oh, wow. All righty. I believe Raven Simone on The View also put her foot in her mouth again with some comments she made pertaining to this same story about the young lady should have more respect for authority, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, so
and evidently she didn't, word it right, so she got hammered with a bunch of Twitter comments. So I'll spare you the details. We won't call it up. But anyway, I think we've run out of time.
Yes, we only have about 30 seconds.
So this has been Media Watch, brought to you by EVT Educational Productions and the good graces of Manhattan Network. I'm Eric Tait.
And I'm Bob Anthony. And please check out our YouTube channel at EVT, at Media Watch EVT. Just search for that, Media Watch EVT.
And we'll catch you the next time.